It was a quiet morning at the top floor of Clinique Serenity, where soft light filtered through white curtains, casting a glow on the dark skin of the man lying motionless on a high-end medical bed. The monitor tracking his vital signs beeped in a slow, steady rhythm, as if it weren't monitoring life but recording a sorrowful melody. Bennett, 32 years old, tech billionaire, founder of Reynolds Tech, and one of the few black men to have ever led a Fortune 500 company. But at this moment, that name was nothing more than a line on a medical chart. It was said he had fallen into a deep coma after a private jet crash nearly 3 weeks ago, an inexplicable incident that killed the co-pilot and left a long red scar across Andre's forehead. No one knew that Andre had regained consciousness on the third day, and for the past 15 days he had kept his eyes shut, breathing steadily, like it was programmed to observe in silence. Not because he was weak, but because he knew. If he opened his eyes too soon, he would never find out who truly wanted him dead. Outside the soundproof glass door, two people spoke in hushed tones, but to Andre each word, each breath pierced his mind like needles. "We can't wait forever, Marcus. The board has lost its patience. Investors are already pulling out." The voice belonged to a woman, soft but with calculation laced beneath every syllable. Her name was Vanessa Bennett, Andre's wife of 7 years, the same woman who once placed her hand on his chest and said, "Even if the world turns its back on you, I'll still be here." But now she stood aligned with someone else, Marcus Hayes, Andre's half-brother and vice president of Reynolds Tech. "Patience." Vanessa Marcus replied, his voice colder than the air conditioning in the room. "1 more week, just as planned. The incapacity clause will be triggered. You remember the arrangement with Dr. Nolan, don't you? The medical report is already prepared." A sharp pain in Andre's chest, not from medication, but from betrayal. His fingers twitched slightly, an instinctive reaction, but he stopped himself just in time. The monitor must not detect anything. Now he was certain the crash wasn't accidental, not a technical failure, not fate. It was a meticulously orchestrated conspiracy, and the crash was merely the first step in a plan to seize the entire empire he had built from nothing. The only sound in the room was the soft humming of machines. Andre lay still like a bronze statue, silent, unmoving, waiting. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure: if I survived the ruthless rules of the tech world before this time, I'll survive too, but not just to live, to win. Night 18. The hospital's circadian rhythm shifted into the night shift. The blue-white lights cast a sterile, chilling glow so cold that words felt meaningless. But tonight was different. The door opened softly like a breath. A woman entered, wearing a navy scrub uniform, hair tied high and eyes sharp, as if she could see through skull and brain. There were no heavy footsteps, no falsely gentle voice like the others who spoke to comatose patients, just a calm, professional presence. And fully alert. "Good evening, Mr. Bennett," she said evenly, her tone steady like a machine, expecting no response. Andre listened. This wasn't the old nurse, the brown-haired woman who wore overly sweet perfume and sometimes called him sleeping handsome. This voice was different, measured, educated. It weighed someone who wasn't here for a hospital paycheck. "I'm Jasmine Lee. I've just been assigned as your new night nurse, replacing the previous one." She paused as if choosing her words. "Who suddenly resigned." Andre didn't react, but every cell in his body waited for something. Jasmine moved to the bedside, checked the vitals monitor, and adjusted the IV. Her movements were quick and precise, as if she had worked here for years, not just 3 days. Then she sat down, The leather chair gave a soft creak. A strange silence filled the room, stretching out for seconds, like time held its breath. Then Jasmine spoke, this time not with a nurse's voice, but with the voice of someone confessing. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I must say this. I'm not supposed to be here." Andre kept his breathing even, but his heart suddenly quickened. "I'm not a regular nurse. I'm a forensic neurologist. I used to work with medical misconduct investigation teams in 2 other states. And I was sent here after a colleague who cared for you reported something suspicious, then disappeared." She reached into the pocket of her blouse and pulled out a small folded note, gently placing it on the bedside table as if it were evidence worthy of respectful delivery. "Last night I reviewed your treatment file. The dosage of sedatives you've been given far exceeds the necessary amount. Reflex tests were never conducted. EEG results were blurred. Everything points to one conclusion: someone is deliberately keeping you in a medically induced coma." A chill ran down Andre's spine, but he remained motionless. His breath is steady like the Rolex ticking on Marcus's wrist. Jasmine leaned in closer, whispering, "I don't know who's behind it yet, but I will find out. And I'll help you wake up, even if it means I lose my job, my license, or worse." Then she stood up and adjusted the IV tube again. "I've already begun tapering your sedatives bit by bit. No one will notice. But if your body is strong enough in a few days, we may be able to start communicating." Suddenly, the door opened. "Just checking vitals as requested," Dr. Nolan Jasmine said, instantly switching back to a professional, courteous tone. "Thank you, nurse. I'll take over." As the doctor entered, Andre remained still, unblinking. But in his mind, a storm was beginning to rise. For the first time in 18 days, he was no longer alone, and no one in that room knew that the man they thought was unconscious had just found the one ally brave enough to stand against the dark. Night 20. Light rain tapped gently against the window pane. The light in the hospital room cast a soft golden hue over Andre Bennett's closed eyes. But tonight, they were no longer shut. They were open on the inside. Beneath eyelids that seemed still, his pupils moved subtly, tracking the soft footsteps of Jasmine Lee, the one woman left who believed he was imprisoned within his own body. Jasmine gently pulled the blanket up to Andre's chest, just like she always did, then leaned in close. No promises, no background music, just a gaze filled with determination. "I need to know," she whispered. "Can you hear me?" Silence. Then the movement is very slight. Andre's right index finger twitched once, then again. Jasmine froze like ice. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "That's real," she gasped, heart pounding. Another movement, slower, controlled. "We need a code," she said, scanning the room, then leaning closer to whisper in his ear. "1 movement means yes, 2 means no. Blink once if you agree, a single blink. Slow, deliberate." Jasmine stepped back, eyes filling with tears, not from weakness, but from witnessing a miracle. And finally, having proof that everything she had risked was worth it. That night when the clinic was silent, as if the world had receded behind steel doors, Jasmine drew the curtains, turned off the lighting, and switched on the dim night lamp. She opened her bag and pulled out a handmade alphabet board. It was a white panel with handwritten AZ divided into 3 horizontal rows and 3 vertical columns. "We're going to spell out each letter," she said. "I'll point to a row and you blink. Then I'll point to a letter and you blink again. It'll take time, but we'll be able to talk." And they began. At first, they were just single words. Each night, letter by letter, blink by blink, like drops of water breaking down a wall of silence. "My name is Andre. They want to kill me. Marcus, Vanessa, Aurora Project. Each word was like a blade, not to wound, but to cut through the web of lies that had surrounded him for so long. Jasmine's voice trembled. Aurora, that's the energy project you led, right? The one the board never publicly mentioned. I read the leaked brief. It was meant to provide low-cost renewable power to inner cities and rural areas. Andre blinked once. They hate it because it doesn't bring fast profits. A pause. And because it's led by a black man, Jasmine blurted. No immediate response. Then, one blink, sharp, intentional. Jasmine sat down, opened her notebook, and began writing down every word they exchanged. She was rebuilding a man's voice, stripped of his right to speak. But more than that, she restored his life in its most primal form, to be heard, understood, and fight back. From that night forward, they were no longer nurse and patient. They were allies in a quiet trench. The only weapons were patience, loyalty, and an alphabet board. At the end of her shift, Jasmine stood, packed her things, but her gaze lingered on him. Andre, I won't let you fight this alone. She touched the back of his hand with a soft gesture like a vow. And as the door closed behind her, Andre closed his eyes, but this time with a faint smile. He was no longer alone, and he was speaking again, one word, one blink at a time, to take everything back. Night 22. The room felt as still as any other night, but everything was starting to move beneath that stillness. Andre could now move his wrist slightly. His eyes tracked more freely, and his breathing was nearly fully autonomous. But that wasn't enough. They needed proof, not a suspicion, solid evidence, and they needed someone who could bring the truth to light, without being crushed by the system. Jasmine knew precisely who to find. The following night, she entered the room with another woman walking behind her. She had a petite build, hair in a tight bun, and eyes sharp and focused like X-rays cutting through white walls. Mr. Bennett, this is Dr. Michelle Chan, Jasmine said softly as she closed the door and drew the curtains over the window. She's a forensic neurologist. I trust her completely. Dr. Chan didn't exchange pleasantries. She pulled a chair beside Andre, locked eyes with him, and after a few seconds nodded. Full cognition, pupillary response is strong. The left eyelid flinches slightly, which is an involuntary reflex. A comatose patient can't do that. She conducted reflex tests without electronic devices, hands, experience, or instinct. 30 minutes passed. Just as you suspected, Dr. Chan said. There's no sign of permanent neurological damage. None. This is a case of chemical coma, prolonged sedation without therapeutic cause. Jasmine sat at the bedside, not surprised, but her eyes lit up with fire. It was time to act. We need hard evidence, she said, something no one can deny, not even in court. Dr. Chan paused in thought. Then she opened her bag and pulled out a portable diagnostic device, small as a pencil case, encrypted and not synced to any hospital system. This will record real-time neurological activity and save it to a standalone drive. It can prove Mr. Bennett is fully conscious and that the drugs he's receiving are unnecessary. Is it risky? Jasmine asked. If we're caught, I could lose my license. But if we don't act, he'll die. So, what other choice is there? Andre twitched a finger once. The answer was clear. Dr. Chan gently attached the device to Andre's wrist in the dim room and applied bioadhesive sensors to his temples and chest. The data began streaming, vivid, sharp, complete. Brainwaves steady, strong. Consciousness confirmed. Reflexes responsive. No physical damage. All done, she said, slipping the device into her coat pocket. This will be the first nail in Marcus and Vanessa's coffin. Jasmine stepped closer to Andre. We have the tool, but time is running out. The board is meeting in a few days. They think you know nothing, but now they're wrong." Andre blinked once, then looked toward the door where Marcus Hayes had appeared just beyond the hall. Marcus glanced into the room through the glass, unaware that the brother he believed to be comatose had just laid the foundation for the most devastating silent counterattack he would ever face. From a body that seemed drowned in drugs and betrayal, Andre Bennett was rising not as a victim, but as a strategist. Monday morning, the sky above Reynolds' tech headquarters was streaked with a pale grey hue, as if nature was watching the most secretive meeting in the company's history. Floor 47. Executive boardroom, expansive glass windows, a long walnut table, leather chairs aligned with ceremonial precision. But today the atmosphere was heavy as stone. Marcus Hayes stood at the head of the table, clad in a light grey suit and dark tie, every detail meticulously arranged. He smiled at each board member as if his older brother had died in silence and his era was beginning. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, his voice warm, but calculation gleamed in his eyes. "I know the past few days have been difficult, but we must make a decision for the company's future." 12 people from all backgrounds and races sat around the table, but nearly every face was tense, except for one, Danielle Brooks, the only black member of the board and Andre's closest friend. She remained calm, but her phone lay on the table silently recording. Marcus began distributing copies of the medical report he had orchestrated with Dr. Nolan. As you'll see from Dr. Nolan's documentation, Andre's neurological condition has deteriorated severely. The report confirms permanent brain damage. No signs of recovery. There were murmurs. One person asked quietly, "Are you sure I saw Andre just 2 weeks ago, and the medical team's report is conclusive?" Marcus cut in, his smile unwavering. "Therefore, according to protocol, I propose that temporary executive authority be transferred to me to ensure stability." The woman seated to Marcus's right, Vanessa Bennett, nodded faintly, eyes lowered as if mourning, but to the observant eye, her wedding ring was gone. Danielle noticed, and she didn't overlook it. "Excuse me, Danielle," said her voice steady but firm. "I have one last question before we vote." Marcus turned to her, still wearing his diplomatic smile. "Of course. Why isn't Dr. Nolan here to present his conclusions in person?" The air in the room froze. Vanessa glanced at Marcus. He replied, he was called into an emergency shift this morning, but I believe the report is detailed enough." Danielle didn't respond immediately. She only raised an eyebrow. Her hand remained on her phone, still recording. "If no one has further questions..." Marcus stepped toward the center of the room. "We'll proceed with the vote." He raised his hand, ready to signal, when a voice rang out, deep, calm, clear, undeniable. "I have a comment." Every head turned toward the door, and there stood Andre Bennett, awake, upright, eyes blazing, a navy blue suit perfectly tailored to every inch. His right hand rested lightly on an ebony cane, his left hand gripped a folder. Behind him stood Jasmine Lee and Dr. Michelle Chan. Following them was Olivia Carter, the renowned attorney, holding a thick black briefcase. The room fell dead silent. Vanessa dropped her glass. Marcus staggered back, pale as ash. "No way," he murmured, as if seeing a ghost. "Dr. Nolan confirmed you were in a deep coma." Andre stepped into the room, his gaze locked on his brother. "Dr. Nolan," he interrupted, "is currently under police interrogation for falsifying medical records and conspiracy to murder, sedative abuse." The room erupted like a slow-burning bomb. But Andre wasn't finished. "I'm not here to reclaim my position. I'm here to show you the true face of the man who tried to bury me alive." He nodded at Jasmine. She stepped forward and raised her tablet, playing a video recording Marcus in a hospital hallway, said to Dr. Nolan, "Keep him under until the board vote. After that, let nature take its course." Silence. Then shock. Then rage. Marcus tried to object, but Olivia stepped forward, placing documents before each board member. The documents were evidence of wire transfers from an offshore account under Marcus's name to Dr. Nolan starting 3 days before the plane crash. Vanessa tried to speak Mal. "Andre, you misunderstood. I only wanted to protect you." Andre looked at her colder than steel. "Is your wedding ring in your purse? Or did you already sell it?" She froze. No reply. Security was called. Marcus and Vanessa were escorted out. Danielle, who had quietly recorded the entire meeting, stood, walked over and touched Andre's shoulder. "I thought we lost you," she whispered. Andre looked around the room, at those who now bowed their heads, then turned to Jasmine, the woman who gave him back his life without needing a vow. "No," he said, voice low. "This is just the beginning." No one in the room dared to speak. Andre Bennett, the man they believed to be in a vegetative state, stood among them, walking toward Marcus and Vanessa like a living sentence. No shouting, no pounding fists. Just the presence of a man who survived an assassination attempt and whose eyes no longer belonged to a CEO, but to someone risen to reclaim justice. "You don't get to blame me," Marcus shouted as he was held back. "Aurora will ruin everything. It'll destroy the energy industry, collapse shareholder deals." Andre stood unmoved, unshaken. "You're right about one thing," he said. "Aurora will kill something, but it's the greed of men like you." He nodded to Olivia Carter, his most trusted lawyer. She opened her case, pulled a stack of documents and slid them toward the board. "These are emails, texts, and transaction logs between Marcus Hayes and Vanessa Bennett in the 6 weeks leading up to the crash," Olivia said, voice crisp. Repeated phrases include, "permanent solution to the Aurora problem," "if Andre disappears," "seize control once the board has majority." A board member leaned forward, reading every line. Another asked, "Is this real, fully verified?" Cross-checked by independent legal experts and pre-submitted to the district attorney's office. But that wasn't the final blow. Jasmine Lee stepped forward and held her tablet high. "Please watch the following video." The clip played Marcus whispering into Dr. Nolan's ear in the hospital hallway, "Keep the sedative levels high. Don't let him blink. If anyone asks, blame neural spasms. Keep him under until the vote. And we'll own everything." The room fell into dead silence. Vanessa tried to protest. "You don't get it, Andre. Everything I did. It's because you're too soft. Aurora will bankrupt us. I did it to protect the company for you." Andre laughed a single laugh, enough to freeze the entire room. "Protect the company. You sold your shares 3 days after I fell into a coma. You met with 3 other energy conglomerates and pitched Aurora like your own. So who were you protecting? Me or your greed?" Security entered the room. Marcus and Vanessa were handcuffed. But before leaving, Marcus turned back, snarling through clenched teeth. "You just killed this company, Andre. When Aurora goes public, the investors will run. No one backs something that doesn't make money." Andre didn't look back. He spoke only one sentence as sharp as a blade slicing to the bone. "Aurora isn't charity. It's legacy." Andre turned to face the board as the door closed behind the 2 traitors. People were now standing at a crossroads to turn away or step forward. "I didn't come back to save a company," he said, slow and sure. I came back to rebuild a purpose I had forgotten when I got swept into the world of power, equity, and markets. Danielle Brooks stood first, the only one who never took her eyes off him. I stand with you. Then one by one, they rose. That night, in a quiet lounge behind company headquarters, Andre sat beside Jasmine, his eyes watching the lights reflected on the glass tower across the street. "You didn't have to do everything you did, Jasmine." "I know," she replied softly. "But if I stayed silent, I'd have become part of that crime. And I couldn't live with that." Andre looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you for giving me my voice back. Not just with words, but with life." 6 months later, Reynolds Tech's headquarters no longer looked the same. Its glass walls were now coated with heat-absorbing materials. On the rooftop, hundreds of solar panels from the Aurora system shimmered like dragon scales. Below, a dedicated section of the parking lot offered free charging for electric vehicles owned by low-income employees. But the most significant change wasn't in architecture. It was in the mindset of the entire system. Andre Bennett stood before the glass wall of the 48th floor, the very room that once symbolized isolated power. It has been expanded and merged with a shared lounge space where young employees can walk in without appointments. The culture of hierarchy had been erased. Light streamed in like a declaration: this company would have no more darkness. "You should see this," Jasmine Lee said as she stepped in, holding a tablet. A smile played on her lips. Andre turned his gaze, softening. On the screen, a video from a public school in the Bronx, New York. Children cheered beneath the pristine white lights powered by Aurora, the clean, low-cost energy project. A banner hung in the hallway. "Today, no one has to do homework in the dark." Jasmine looked up, her eyes lit with relief. Phase 1 complete, a 78% drop in electricity costs at all test sites. And we've received deployment requests from 3 more states. Andre nodded slowly. And the investors, they were nervous at first, but since the stock surged 42% after the Aurora expansion announcement, they're fighting to get on the calendar. The door swung open. Danielle Brooks walked in, followed by Olivia Carter, now Chief Legal Officer of Reynolds Tech. Danielle placed a stack of documents on the glass table. The Bennett Lee Medical Ethics Foundation is now officially registered. Jasmine's eyes widened. She turned to Andre. "You put my name on it?" Andre nodded. "No speech, no ceremony. You saved my life. Your name belongs there." "And you didn't just save one life," Olivia added. "This foundation will allocate 30% of Aurora's profits to fund medical ethics reform programs, encrypted monitoring cameras, prescription audits, independent oversight, starting with 12 hospitals next month." Andre looked at Jasmine. This time she had no words. She just shook her head and smiled. "I'm still not used to my name being on a global platform." "You will be," Andre replied, "because this world needs more people like you, not more CEOs like me." Danielle lifted her tablet, frowning slightly. "One more thing. I got a call today from the federal prison. Marcus Hayes wants to speak with you. He says he has information." Andre turned back toward the glass, his eyes as still as water. "About what?" "About others behind the attempt to sabotage Aurora. Big names in the traditional energy industry." Andre didn't turn around. He only spoke a single sentence, like the final chord of a symphony. "Let him stay there. The truth will rise when the time is right." That night, Andre and Jasmine walked together through the campus of Reynolds Tech's new research center. They passed labs where young scientists of every color and nationality worked under bright lights with shining eyes and brighter dreams. "You know what impresses me most?" Jasmine asked. "It's not the technology. It's The atmosphere here. They believe they're changing the world. Andre smiled but said nothing. His hand gently touched the glass pane where a young brown-skinned boy presented before a digital whiteboard. In Andre's eyes now, there was no longer a CEO, no longer a billionaire. Only a man had rediscovered himself after the world tried to erase him in silence. "You could have come back, taken your company, and walked away with victory," Jasmine said, "but you didn't." Why? Andre stopped and turned to her. The streetlight fell on his face, still marked by the scar on his temple. But now it was a scar of pride. "Because I learned one thing," he said. "Power without purpose is hollow. I had everything: money, fame, control. But it wasn't until I nearly died in a cold room, betrayed by people I loved, that I understood success isn't about what I keep. It's about what I leave behind." 3 weeks after Aurora's national expansion was announced, Reynolds Tech headquarters had become the epicenter of media attention and global expectation. But Andre Bennett wasn't celebrating. He didn't appear on talk shows. He didn't grace magazine covers. Because he knew the real game wasn't over yet. That morning, Olivia Carter entered Andre's office and placed a grey envelope on his desk. No sender, no stamp. It was delivered through internal prison channels. It bypassed the standard review system. Andre opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, slanted, shaky, but its message cut like a blade. "You think we were everything. I was just a pawn. The real sponsor of Aurora's takedown isn't in your family. It's on the list of campaign donors. Their names are everywhere in oil defense and traditional investment funds. You've barely scratched the surface." Andre sat still. He didn't blink. No anger, no shock. Just a slow, steady nod. "I always knew." Marcus wasn't smart enough to develop the entire plan himself. Danielle Brooks entered just then, carrying a tablet already unlocked. "You'll want to see this," she said. On the screen, a closed congressional hearing featuring representatives from 3 of the nation's top energy conglomerates. A young senator questioned them about the unexplained disappearance of clean energy initiatives previously linked to Reynolds Tech. Below the video, a small caption is almost buried. "Former Peter Nolan has agreed to cooperate with federal investigators, providing names of individuals who financed and directed the falsification of Andre Bennett's medical records." The atmosphere in the room thickened. Jasmine Lee, standing by the window, turned slowly and asked if that list exists. "What happens if we make it public?" Olivia answered immediately, sharp as a blade. "We'll be targeting figures capable of shaking entire governments. Some are cabinet members. One of them is running for president." Andre rose and walked toward the wall where a map of Aurora's global expansion hung, tiny lights marking where the project had been deployed or approved: Haiti, Detroit, Kenya, New Mexico. He stared at it as if gazing at an entire world waiting for electricity, not just from power grids, but from the belief that something good still exists. "If I go public," he said slowly, "Aurora will lose its funding. Dozens of infrastructure contracts will be suspended. Partners will withdraw under political pressure." Jasmine stayed silent, then whispered, "And if you stay silent, you're living just like them." In that moment, Andre Bennett understood victory in the boardroom was just a small battle. True justice had to be reclaimed from names that never made the headlines. He turned to look at Jasmine, Olivia, and Danielle, the 3 women who had saved him not with pity but with courage, intellect, and integrity. "We won't go public yet," Andre said, "but we'll prepare. Every line, every video, every piece of evidence. And when the moment comes, we won't have to release it. The truth will speak for itself." That night, Andre returned late. He walked alone through Reynolds Tech's new research center, where interns were still working young minds unaware that their projects threatened the most powerful forces in the nation. He stopped in front of a glass panel. Behind it, a 16-year-old Asian boy was assembling an energy converter. Seeing Andre, the boy quickly stood up, ready to apologize for staying late. Andre just smiled. "Keep going. We're changing the world." The conspiracies against Aurora hadn't disappeared. They had only receded into the shadows watching. But Andre didn't back down, because he knew every time a light turned on in a poor school, it was one more reason he couldn't remain silent. The fight wasn't over. But this time he wasn't alone, and this time he was ready. 3 months after Aurora's nationwide deployment, Reynolds Tech's main building had become a destination for international delegations, energy, students, policymakers, and people who once didn't believe a billion-dollar corporation could choose to do what was right instead of easy. Inside the first-floor atrium, once the venue for lavish shareholder galas, was now transformed into the community research hall. No more red carpets, no more champagne, just technical blueprints, Aurora simulation models, and the laughter of young researchers from underrepresented communities. Andre Bennett walked in. No one stood, no one bowed. Because he had laid down the law himself. If I can't sit and eat with the person designing our microchips, I have no right to lead this company. Jasmine Lee stood by the large window, watching interns deliver a presentation. Among them were a blonde white girl, a brown-skinned boy from Morocco, and a transgender student wearing a she-they pin. Jasmine was still, not because they were different, but because for the first time she saw a place where no one had to ask permission to exist. Andre stepped beside her, voice low. "As a student, I applied to 3 major tech companies. I never heard back from any of them." "Why?" Jasmine asked. Andre gave a faint smile. "My name was Andre Devonte Bennett. When I changed it to Andrew D. Bennett and resubmitted, the same 3 companies invited me to interview within 48 hours. That was why Reynolds Tech implemented the Equiview system, a blind recruiting tool that stripped resumes of names, gender, race, and schools, leaving only skills, motivation, and personality." Danielle Brooks, now senior HR director, once said during an internal talk, "We don't hire the best people. We create an environment where everyone can become their best." Aurora, once a controversial initiative, had become a national model. 12 states had included it in their strategic energy programs. Every time a low-income family received a utility bill cut by a third, Reynolds Tech's team received emails, photos, and thank you notes from all over the nation. Andre didn't frame them on the walls. He printed them into small booklets and handed them to every new hire with one line at the front. "This is why we're here. Not to prove we're brilliant, but to prove that kindness can be systematized." In a private interview with international press, a journalist asked, "Do you believe traditional powers will again attack this model?" Andre smiled. "The truth will always be under attack, but this time it's not just one of us. This time we have an entire culture that refuses to compromise." That evening, a group of high school students from Harlem visited the Aurora Research Center. Among them was a 14-year-old black boy, notebook in hand, eyes gleaming with curiosity. When the tour ended, he lingered behind, hesitated, then stepped toward Andre. "Mr. Bennett, did you get betrayed by your own family?" Andre crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Yes, I did." "Were you scared?" Andre looked at him, steady and direct. "Of course I was, but fear didn't stop me. Silence is the only thing that ever kills justice." The boy nodded and jotted down another line in his notebook. Andre glanced at it. In small handwritten words, "Justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone to speak before it's too late." And that was what Reynolds Tech had become, not a corporation, not a brand, but a flame quiet, resilient, that burned down the compromise with a culture of organized resistance. A place where a CEO once poisoned into silence had turned that silence into a wake-up call for an entire generation. One September afternoon, sunlight streamed through Reynolds Tech's central tower's reflective glass, scattering streaks of gold across the reclaimed wood floors like fragments of memory lining the halls. A new glass plaque had just been mounted in the central atrium, filled with greenery and recycled timber. Etched onto it, true strength is not in the power we accumulate, but in how we use it when threatened. It is in our weakest moments that we discover who we are. Beneath it in smaller, faint letters, quote by Jasmine Lee, Night 20 ICU Room. Jasmine stood before the plaque, her hand resting gently on the cool surface. Behind her, Andre stepped forward, silent for a few seconds, before asking, "Did you say that?" Jasmine smiled softly. "At the time, I thought you couldn't hear me." Andre looked at her voice, low and steady. "I didn't just hear you. I lived by it every day since." The two walked to the staircase to the Global Aurora exhibit, where clean energy projects from 37 countries, from Ghana to Guatemala, were displayed. On a massive wall, a world map glowed with bright points, spreading like a living artery. Jasmine paused and asked, "You once said you came back to reclaim justice. What about now? What is it that you want?" Now, Andre remained silent for a long while, then answered not with the polished words of a CEO, but with the quiet voice of a man who had lost everything and found something far more precious. "I don't want anything more. I want to leave something behind. Not fame, not statues, but direction. Something for others to look at and know you can do the right thing and still survive." That night, as the city lit up, Andre and Jasmine walked through the Reynolds Grand Hall, now home to a newly inaugurated exhibit titled The Quiet Archive. There were no hero portraits, no grand speeches, just original documents, silent video recordings, forged medical records, and the 46-second clip of Marcus ordering Andre to be kept in an induced coma. A single line hung on the wall: "Silence can kill a man, but when it is broken, it can liberate a generation." Across town, in a windowless prison cell, Marcus Hayes lay under cold white lights. He had just signed a federal cooperation agreement. The names were beginning to surface: CEOs, politicians, and powerful shareholders who had once supported the plot to destroy Aurora. And outside, a federal task force was reopening 10 cold cases previously dismissed due to lack of evidence. Andre didn't need to say a word, because now the truth had learned to walk on its own. 6 months later, the Aurora grid officially went live in the Appalachian Mountains, where thousands of families had lived in darkness for generations. The first child flipped the switch, beaming as light filled the old worn house. A photo of that moment was sent to Reynolds Tech headquarters. Andre pinned it on the corner of his office wall, right next to the photos of those who had betrayed him. He didn't tear the past down. He left it as a reminder that what defines a person isn't who tried to destroy them, but how they survived it. And so the man once poisoned in silence taught the world this truth: resurrection, when fueled by purpose, it is the most potent form of resistance. Because power can be stolen, reputation can be destroyed, but true value cannot be killed. Not if we have the courage to keep it alive. "Are we done?" Jasmine asked as the two stood together beneath the last golden light of day. Andre turned to her. No smile, no solemnity, just one quiet sentence: "No. We're just getting started."